And today, as I said to you before, I'm going to talk to you about the fastest way to go broke as a freight broker or freight agent. And I'm telling you, you want to avoid this mistake like the plague. So let me give you a quick summary, right? There's a huge misconception, particularly when you're new to the industry, whether you be a new freight broker or a new freight agent. You get on the phone with a shipper prospect and they say to you, I'll send you my load list. I'll put you on our email list where you'll get our daily load list. Okay. And all of a sudden the broker agent gets real excited and they say, I got a shipper. I'm so excited. And I understand the enthusiasm and I can appreciate that. But here's what happens. Here's typically what happens when you operate or try to get freight or make money by using a shipper's load list. Here's what happens. So the shipper says they're going to put you on the load list. They start sending you daily emails with a list of loads that are available. What you don't know is that that list of loads is going out to dozens and dozens of other carriers and other brokers. And what that shipper's doing is trying to create a cutthroat mentality where it's what I call jump ball freight. They throw the freight up in the middle and whoever jumps the highest gets the ball, just like in basketball, okay, if you can visualize that. So here's what happens. You as the broker or agent, take that load list. Maybe you get 10 or 20 or 30 loads on that load list that are going to go out today or in the next couple of days. And then you rush to post all those loads to your load board, whether that be the DAT, whether that be truck stop, whatever load board you're using. And then all of a sudden you start getting a bunch of calls from carriers, and then you start making calls to carriers, and maybe you talk to 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 different carriers. And what happens is you finally are able to find a truck and negotiate the rate for that truck, because in most cases, those load lists will have a price. They set the price, okay? And so you finally find a carrier that has a truck available on the day you need at the price that you need. And then what happens is you call back the shipper and the shipper says, oh, that's already been covered. Has that happened to any of you? Has that ever happened to you? So that's the pitfall. That's the problem. Just imagine all the work that you did. You got the email. You entered all the loads in the load board. You took a whole bunch of phone calls. You probably invested an hour or two worth of time. And then all of a sudden, you make the connection, you get really excited because you're going to make a couple $100 on this load. And then you call the shipper back or you email them and they say, oh, that load was already covered. So what happens is a lot of times that'll take the wind out of the sails of a brand new broker, and it'll really discourage them because of the amount of time and energy that they just invested to try to cover that load. And so in my opinion, and this is going to be very controversial, just so you know, there's going to be people that are watching this that are going to disagree with me. There are going to be other trainers that are going to disagree with me. There are going to be shippers that are going to disagree with me. I don't really care. I'm giving you my opinion after being an entrepreneur for 25 years and being involved in the freight and logistics company for 17 years, okay? And after working with thousands of different shippers, thousands of different brokers and agents and carriers throughout my career. And so I think that using load lists, okay, as a way to try to cover freight and make a profit is a waste of time. I really do, because I just described to you what happens 90+% of the time. It's not like that's a rarity. That's the norm. When you operate as a broker or an agent off of a load list, that's going to happen more times than not. You are going to call back that shipper. You're going to send an email, and that load is going to be covered because it's jump ball. Whoever jumps the highest right at that moment and has a truck available at that price is going to get the freight. Okay. So I learned very quickly not to waste my time there. And I taught all of my brokers, all of my agents, all of my people not to try to compete in that space. And so at first they resisted because they're like, well, how am I going to cover loads? Well, here's how you cover loads. Here's the alternative to working from load lists. Here's how you want to work with a shipper. So you contact a shipper, you start developing a relationship. They allow you to submit rates on different lanes where they need help, right? So let's assume we get to that point. you submit some rates, you negotiate the rates, and at that point, they approve you as a vendor and they approve your rates on those lanes, whatever it is, okay? Now, what happens in the way I teach it and the way it's best done to ensure that you're making money and not wasting time and getting frustrated is that when that shipper tenders the load, they don't send it out on a list to 10 or 20 brokers. They send it only to me. I am dedicated on that load. I might even be dedicated on that lane where I get all of the freight when that lane comes up, but I'm definitely dedicated on that individual load. And so what happens, I don't have to jump ball. I don't have to jump the highest. I don't have to scurry to post 20 loads. I don't have to field 100 phone calls and then call back and say it's been covered because that load is mine. It's dedicated to me. And I now know that all I have to do is to connect the dots. I've got to post the load. I got to find a carrier. I got to negotiate a rate. I got to dispatch the truck. I've got to do check calls. I got to make sure it picks up and delivers on time in good condition, invoice the shipper, and I'm going to get paid. Okay. So there's the alternative. You operate as a jump ball broker, or you operate as a broker that becomes a dedicated resource that gets loads tendered only to them. Okay. So I want you to understand it's really important, the distinction there. And so, that's a challenge for some people. And here's what I suggest. Stop working on jump ball freight. Stop wasting your time. You think you're making progress, but all you're doing is filling up all of your time. All you're doing is busy. You're not productive. You're busy, but you're not profitable. You'd be better off spending your time prospecting for new shippers that are willing to dedicate freight specifically to you and are willing to tender loads directly to you, as opposed to just sending out a bunch of email lists to a list of 10 or 20 or maybe 50 different carriers and brokers and hoping that you can cover it first. Okay. And so, what I suggest again, so what'll happen, the reason why shippers should want to dedicate loads to you and how you can sell that value to your shippers is that, number one, as a shipper, if they were to dedicate that lane to you or that load to you whenever it comes up, they're going to, number one, they're going to have less calls, they're going to have less emails, they're going to have less inquiries about that load, which means it's going to waste less time for them. It's going to be easier for them because whenever that load comes up on the list, all they got to do is pull that load off, send it to you, and they can send the rest of the loads out to their list if they want. But they're going to have less inquiries and they're going to spend less time, right? They're also going to have more consistent rates because working with you on a committed, dedicated rate, you're going to be able to understand the volume that they have on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And you are going to be able to establish rates that are much more consistent and less volatile for them. They're also going to get better service. The reason why they'll get better service is because you as the broker, you can then develop a dedicated carrier base of 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 different carriers that you're using to cover that lane consistently. And as that driver and that carrier gets more familiar with the pickup location and the type of freight and the drop location and how appointments are done and the route and all of that, the freight and the service is going to be more consistent. And I mean, those are just a few reasons why a shipper would want to, smart shippers dedicate freight to specific carriers and to specific brokers, as opposed to doing the load list jump ball freight. So I hope that makes sense to you guys. If it does, let me know in the chat box. Give me an example. Give me a score of 1 to 10. 1 is, this just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think this is of any value. 10 is, I think this is exactly what I needed. This is the perfect topic for me as a new broker, someone that's looking to make money. I don't want to waste my time chasing my tail, getting very frustrated. I want to work with shippers that are committed to me in a real partnership where I know if they tender freight to me, I'm going to make money. So hit me up in the chat box and let me know 1 to 10. While we're waiting for that, listen, just so you guys know, again, I started my freight brokerage back in 2003, was very blessed, grew that company to over 80 million in sales per year, sold the company. But over 10 years ago, I started freightbrokerbootcamp.com, which is the most cost-effective and comprehensive online freight broker and freight agent training program on the market. I've trained over 8,000 students, and we have a 100% money back guarantee, 60-day, 100%, no questions guarantee on that. If you guys enroll in that, and you don't enjoy it, you don't like it, just simply send us an email and we'll refund your money. But listen, if you're curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent, check that out. Again, we've trained over 8,000 students. It's very inexpensive, very cost effective, and it's 100% risk-free. So I think we're getting a lot of feedback from people that they understand the difference between working on load lists where there's no guarantee and a whole lot of frustration versus spending that time trying to find shippers that are going to dedicate specific lanes and specific loads to them.